Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. JACALYN. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. JACALYN at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to USA Global TV and Business Talk Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN Kerbeck, and our show today is Talking Heads. And if you're joining us for the first time, we're so happy to have you here. Talking Heads is a platform where people come from all over the world to have their own 30-minute show where they share their expertise, their knowledge, and their experience to help make us better personally and or professionally. Joining me today is Mr. Red O'Loughlin. He is an incredible person. He's a big part of this platform of what we do here at USA Global TV. He is a co-host of The Wise Ones. If you missed it, it's the show that's on right before this one. You can go watch it on our YouTube channel, USA Global TV. He's also obviously a talking head expert presenter. He is an elevated listener. He is a publisher. He's a longevity expert. He is a veteran. He himself is an author, and he's also part of our Talking Heads panel that takes place next week, April the 12th at 4 p.m. Let's welcome him to the show, Mr. Red O'Loughlin. Hi, Red.
Hi, Dr. JACALYN. Good to see you again.
We're going to have to make these shows longer because the introductions they're taking up like 10 minutes.
Now, you said 4 o'clock next on the Thursday, on the 12th. Is that
Eastern Standard Time?
Because I've so many times that Eastern and Central, it's amazing how easy it is to confuse them.
We've got Pacific, we've got British Summer Time, Central European Time, New Zealand Time. So yes, it is Eastern. Thank you for clarifying that, helping me clarify that. So I'm going to go backstage and produce the show, and you let me know when you're ready for your deck.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Dr.
Thank
JACALYN.
you.
This is number 4 of 6, and we're talking about writing options today. The main theme of this series of presentations is how to write and publish your book for free. Now, we're talking about free, meaning no money out of your pocket. There's obviously time involved. There's a lot of energy involved, a lot of thought involved. But as far as dollars out of your pocket, you can write and publish your book for free. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this entire presentation. We've talked about, in the first part, we talked about, the thoughts that should go in before you write the book. We talked about author research, how to be successful in that. Last week, we talked about titles and a few other things in that. Today, we're actually talking about how do we write, the writing options we have. So why don't we go ahead and start out first, and Dr. JACALYN, I'm ready when you are. Okay. Writing options. The disclaimer up front right now is everything I'm talking about is oriented to nonfiction. When you're starting to write novels, totally different world. Romance, totally different world. You start having dialogues with characters. You have locations. You have all sorts of other things, thrillers and mysteries. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the basic nonfiction, how-to kinds of books, maybe a biography. If you're a motivational speaker and you want to talk about the subject that you know the best, it could be something as simple as dog grooming or baking or whatever. I've done a couple of cookbooks, and they follow roughly the same format. But the basic how-to nonfiction book is what we're talking about. And again, we want to keep everything with regard to these series of presentations on the free basis. We need to outline things. We need to organize our thoughts. We need to get the processes written, and we need to edit and proof. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Moving to the next slide. One of the things I strongly recommend is your competition. You're writing a book. Who out there has the same kind of book that you are? What do they offer that you don't? We talked a lot more detail about that. I showed you how you actually go into Amazon and can see exactly what details that you should be concerned about. Look at other people's table of contents, see how big their books are, what they charge for them, etc. But knowing your competition is a big deal, because you maybe at some point in time compared to say, well, how do you compare against somebody? Well, it's nice to know that number one, that person is a competitor and that you're aware of the name, you're aware of their book, their material. And one of the ways to know that is by reading. One of my mentors a long time ago, Myron Golden, said, if you read 3 books, you're generally considered an expert on that topic. He says, read 5 books on that same topic and you have enough information inside your head to write a book. And I found that pretty much to be true. So, when you start in that process, okay, fine, I'm going to write a book. Well, that's fine. 81%, I think, according to New York Times, of people in the United States, Americans, have had that thought in their mind. Yeah, maybe I'd like to write a book. Or somebody told them, you really ought to write a book. But less than 2%, probably even less than 1% in the big scheme of things, actually write a book. It's a far cry between 1% and 81%. So what happens? How do we actually get our brains into the fingertips, into a piece of paper that you can hold up and say, I got a book? Well, part of it's having that writing space. You want to avoid distractions and set some time. So do you have a place in and around? I mean, if you don't have something at your house, maybe you take your laptop up to the library and you take one of those little rooms they have there set aside, and that's where you do your research. That's where you do your writing, and you set aside a certain amount of time. You close the door. That way you're avoiding distractions. You turn off your phone. If you're there at home and you come back after work, have dinner, you're relaxing, and you're just, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes getting my thoughts together and doing everything. Well, let people know that you're not taking phone calls. You'll leave your phone outside. Make sure the kids or the family knows that, hey, unless something is really super critical, that you just need to be, this is your time. And that's kind of the way you need to set things up. In reality, given certain factors we'll talk about later in this presentation, you could literally write a book in a weekend. It's not that difficult. But for most people, this is for the long haul. We're talking weeks or even months. So go ahead and let's jump to the next slide. In writing books, some people say, well, how many words do I have to write? Well, it's not necessarily how many, but to answer that question more specifically, a pamphlet, we're talking something, just more than likely an ebook, less than 40 pages, 10,000 words. A short ebook, maybe twice that, 20,000 words. The standard book that we're talking about here, 40,000 words, that's 100 or so pages. A longer nonfiction book, physical paperback, 60,000 words. A very long nonfiction book, about 80,000 words. I think one of my books is about 80,000. It's about 400 pages. And then 100,000 words, that's your epic length, your book, your biography. Those things tend to go longer. I just finished working with a guy on his biography to do a 6-month honeymoon that he took back in 1964. And we started out with, I think, 180,000 words and about 800 pages. And we got it down to 466 pages by the time it got published. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So what do you want to write about? Some people know immediately what they want to write about because they know why they want to write a book. Dr. JACALYN is very active in many different areas. One is in the Colitis Crohn's Foundation. So if you have a passion of something that you really believe in, that you want to pass on that information, that might be your why. You want to share that information. Other times you may have some skills that you may want to share with people. We see a lot of these how-to videos on YouTube. How do you decorate a cake? How do you, cooking? There's just so many things out there. In researching the writing that I'm in the presentation for today, I listened to several TED Talks on how do you write a book. There's so much information out there. All you have to do is type in Google or in YouTube. Both of those are excellent sources. But essentially, what is your why that sort of gets that passion cranked up just a little bit so that you can, in fact, have a place to start from? And so I mentioned earlier, reading 3 books, you become an expert. 5 books you can write. Well, maybe you need to read just a little bit more in order to find out, well, how much more is there out there than what I know? If you pull up one of your competitors' books, you go into their table of contents and you look at their 15 or 20 chapters and you say, got that, oh, I don't have that one. Or maybe what you have is 3 chapters that person doesn't have. Well, researching the idea helps organize things in your mind as to what you want, what you don't want. It's not just a core dump of everything you have. It's literally what you want to share with your audience. So maybe you might have a mentor. I've had one for various things in my life. But then what does your audience want? What is the expectation of your audience? Is your audience, in my case, because I write on health and wellness, mostly baby boomers. So I look for things that interest that particular group of people. But who is your audience, and what message, what value do you want to add to their lives? Next slide. So when you're outlining your story, this is something that may help. And this is something, mind mapping is not something everybody does, but there's YouTube videos on it. There's a lot of Google stuff on it. But a mind map essentially takes a core thought. I want to write a book. So that's my core thought. You put that in the center of a piece of paper and said, write a book. And then you draw lines out. Well, my writing a book, what are the primary things, essentially the chapters or the sections of the book? So if I want to write a book on a biography of something, a thriller, a romance, whatever that book is, this puts a lot of our thoughts onto paper, because we don't necessarily think in a hierarchical linear fashion. We think sporadically of things. So if we're thinking, if I'm putting this Western in 1865, that's the same time as the Civil War. What's going on? Where are things I need to know more about the United States, the West, 1865. What were they people wearing? What were they eating? What were their transportation? All the things that were going on in that particular part. So maybe you have a time, maybe you have location, maybe you have characters. But if we're looking at a nonfiction book, I'm writing on health and wellness. I may want to have, okay, diets. Well, maybe intermittent diet, maybe an extended diet, maybe fasting, maybe whatever. And so you put these things out there. They're just thoughts. And then with each thought, that either will become a chapter or will become a section of 2 or 3 chapters. Then I go over to that section on fasting. Well, what is a fast? Is fast meaning water only, or can I have something else? Well, there's a fasting mimicking diet that I can actually eat food, but the body doesn't register it as food, even though there's a metabolic response. So you put these ideas and you start filling in the details. What are the things that I want to mention when I talk about fasting? And so each one of these little clouds, for lack of a better word, I have my main cloud in the middle of my mind map. Then I have a cloud up here. And with each cloud, that's my section, but I have the details. What do I want to say about that detail? I move down to the next one, And how do I go from this section to this one? Is there some introductory thing? So if I'm arranging these things and showing relationships, I keep doing this, and I take that section, I make a subsection, and essentially I'm getting this thing put together in a big map of how I want to write this book. And this clarifies a lot of what we need. And mind mapping, there's software tools, there's apps out there you can download for free that will allow you to type this thing up, or you just write it on hand write it on a piece of paper. A lot of things, you're taking ideas and composing something. I don't want to forget that and write it down. Don't want to forget that either. Let's write it down. And trust me, if you don't write it down, you will forget it. Absolutely, you will. But this is not the time to edit. We don't edit while we're doing this process, which in fact, most of the time we don't even edit while we're writing. Just get the information out there, plenty of time for editing down the road. But this gets us started. It takes that idea and makes something in writing, and then shows a relationship, another relationship, to a detailed relationship, and then how do they relate to each other? That's what we're trying to do, is show those relationships. Next slide. Okay. Now we're into the area that I'm almost ready to start writing. Let's say I want to write 40,000 words. Well, how long do I want to write that? Do I want to take 4 months? That's 10,000 words a month. That's 2,500 words a week. That's 500 words a day. That's very reasonable. That's not an unrealistic expectation. So is your expectation to write 40,000 words in a weekend? Maybe that's unrealistic. There are ways to do it, but we'll talk about those down the road. So once you have a deadline, okay, this book's going to take me 4 months. Now you can put on the calendar, I have something, this is what I want to get done. I have my mind map. I know all the parts that I want to put together. That's what I want to do. And we start writing. Now I suggest very, very strongly, start with the part that's most passionate. If you have this is okay, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I really like chapter 5. Start with chapter 5. You don't have to start with the introduction. Start with something that you feel most comfortable with, because once you get stuff on paper and those juices start to flow, now you can actually have progress. But if you start on something, I got to get this done because I got to know, you start where your passion is at, because now you can take that and maybe your next passion is chapter 3 and then chapter 6. Write the chapters that you feel strongly about. As you write those, the rest of it will become more of a habit, because now you've been writing for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and now that part fits in. But you're basically committing when that chapter gets written. That commitment is reinforced, and each chapter at a time. I would not recommend writing 2/3 of chapter 5 and then jumping back to chapter 3, because you need to put that in. If you need to put that in, make a little note to yourself off to the side. I need to include this in chapter 3. At this point in time, like I say, don't put too much information. Keep focused on what you want done. And this is a lot of, I took probably 20 different articles on how to write, probably a half a dozen different videos on how to write. And I compiled them all into the presentation we're getting today. And I'm thinking to myself, at this point in time, you're writing. It's a whole lot easier to edit out something than it is to add something in at the very, very end. Unless something is really critical for your story, for whatever you're publishing, leave it out. But right this minute, put it in as much as you possibly can. You can always come back and delete. Maybe it turns out that this becomes an ebook that you want to write a separate ebook on, and becomes all that information goes to that ebook. Maybe what you have is enough for more than. We just talked with a Gary Turner just a minute ago on The Wise Ones, and his first book was a couple 100,000 words or more than that, and it basically became 3 books. So start with everything you have. It may be more than one book, but make that decision down the road. I would not think that too much information in the initial part is too critical, but keep everything plain language. Keep everything as simple as you can. I strongly recommend that you have an accountability partner, somebody outside your family, somebody that you're saying, okay, I'm going to do 500 words a day. Every Saturday, you're going to email that person and say, okay, this week I got 2,500 words done. This week I got 2,800 words. This week I only got 350. Well, things happen. Life gets in the way. But somebody you're accountable for, because if you're not accountable to somebody, things have a tendency to slide. I only get 300 this week. I only get 300 last week. I don't have to. You rationalize and make excuses. So start with your passion, have an accountability partner, keep everything simple, put as much in as you can at the beginning, and stay focused. Next slide. Okay. When people read something, that first part, if you have a hook as to how to get them in, a lot of good speakers will start with something, and that opening sentence is what keeps them. So I try to focus on what is my best opening sentence for whatever I have, and then at the end of my chapter, how do I introduce my next chapter? So write, but then come back and say, can I make that opening sentence good? And as you start doing this, look at the way your chapters are structured. I have several paragraphs here. How do I get from one paragraph to another? How do I get that interest in there? So as you're writing your first draft, there's a lot of things that you want to capture, get it down, and then rearrange it. I find that when I'm writing my stuff, I'll have 2 or 3 things in one paragraph, and I say, it's getting a little long. I go in there and there's a natural break. That's where I want to break it at. That becomes a new paragraph. So as you're writing, things may not necessarily be clear, but once you step back and you're like, okay, that's a natural breaking point. Now, table of contents, I recommend you use style sheets. You don't have to, but style sheets will automatically create a table of contents. So as you change your book and you add more sections to it, it will automatically do your table of contents. It'll do the table of contents for an ebook where you have a link, a hot link, or it'll do your reassign the pages as the book grows. If you don't know how to do style sheets, I strongly recommend YouTube. It's your best friend for learning how to do anything that you don't know how to do, and it's free. But that doesn't mean you can't write your book, print it out, and then you do your table of contents as a separate one. And I've done that for years. But nowadays, I use style sheets. And it's so simple. And once you do it a few times, you'll say, why didn't I ever do that before? But what What value are you adding to your readers? As you finish that chapter, go back and say, is what I wanted to convey there? There's a lot of good book writing software tools. I mentioned mind maps earlier, but there's so many out there. If you want free software book writing tools, Google it and then look at them, talk to people. If somebody else has used one, maybe they're using, what do you call it? Guys, oh, mind blank. Hemingway. Hemingway is a good one. It's like Grammarly in a way, but it's a book. It helps you get things put together. It gives you assessment. Microsoft Word is what I use. I use their, what do you call, thesaurus. I use their read aloud function. I love that read aloud function. You put the cursor where you hit read aloud, and boom, it reads it back to you. You can hear what you printed, and if something's wrong, you'll hear it sooner than you'll read it, especially if you just wrote it the same 15 minutes ago. Windows Narrator is another one. If you have Windows 10 or 11 on your computer, the computer will read it back. You don't even need to have Word open. It'll read whatever's on the screen. Again, go to YouTube, find out how do I activate Narrator for Windows. A lot of people don't like to use Microsoft Word. They use Google Docs. I'll use Microsoft Word spell check, and then I'll go to Google Docs and use their spell check. I'll actually pick up more errors on using Google Docs spell checker than I will on Microsoft Word. Don't ask me why, but it's just one of those things. Grammarly, a free version, is an excellent spell checker and a grammar source for your information. Evernote's another good one to have that's free. But all of these apps and these software things all help make your work a whole lot easier. Let's jump to the next one. Edit and revise. Leave the editing until the very last minute. Get as much stuff written as you can. Editing is going to take you a long time anyway. I do my editing. I use Word spell check. I go to Google Docs spell check. I use Grammarly. When I get everything through there, I'll I'll print out my pages, and I'll have a party at my house. This was pre-COVID, and I'll invite over 5 or 6 people, a couple different nights. So I get 10 or 12 sets of eyes here, another 10 or 12 sets of eyes. And I give away random chapters of my book in a red pen. We usually have about a half-hour social intercourse where people get a chance to meet each other. And then I say, okay, I give them a clipboard, a red pen, and I say, anything that doesn't make sense, anything that just is weird, circle it. And then I get a bunch of different people to edit my book. Hopefully it's edited enough that they don't find any edits, but every so often somebody will find something. I had a guy over one time, and he says, use the word if a lot. He says, why didn't you change if to when? And so I did that. I went back through the book, and I found 88 times I used the word if. And in reality, I only needed about 6 or 8 times. So I changed it to when as opposed to if. That and which. There's just a lot of different times that maybe I don't need that in there. But people are there to help. And for what I write on health and wellness, it's very technical. I want to make sure it's easy to understand by people. So editing parties are a nice way of having something. Yeah, it might cost you a little bit of money for some dessert or something like that for after dinner. But again, you get a lot of information back very, very quickly. Beta readers, sometimes people belong to a to a social media group, and you have a half a dozen or more people out there that I need a beta reader for my chapters, and 3 or 4 or 5 people out there, yeah, they raise their hands. I'll do it, and they'll send back information to you, give you some feedback. You'll also need an author bio. You'll need it in 2 places. You'll need it for the back of the book, which is about 3 sentences, but you'll also need something at the back of the book, the last chapter usually, that gives a lot more information about you, how to contact you, and things like that. You'll need a book description, again, a very short one, 2 or 3 sentences for the back of the book, and then a much longer one for inside Amazon. So it may be 1,500 words inside Amazon, but on the back of the book, it may only be 100 words. So you need a couple different book descriptions. If you have people you sent this thing, beta readers, and they said, this is really neat, I love it, and they send you back something, and then you ask them, can I use your name in a testimonial? Get their permission first, and then use that as part of the testimonial on the back cover of the book, or put it in the front part of the book where somebody is saying, hey, this is a great book, recommended for whatever. Take advantage of that. Another thing people do, I wouldn't say incorrectly, is they wait till the book is written and then they start marketing it. Why not start when you're composing your thoughts in your mind, you're doing this mind map, let people know on your social media sites, hey, I'm thinking about writing this book. These are the topics that I want to write about. What do you think? Start letting people know you're doing something. That way it gets that word out. You're not waiting until I just finished my book. Here it is. You've wasted months of trying to get reader intrigue started. Next slide. The cover, we're talking about free. When we get into the publishing aspect next week, I'll show you how you can go into Kindle and Amazon and create a cover for free. But the cover, yeah, you can get a cover from Fiverr.com. That's Fiverr.com. Generally for under 50, sometimes for under 20. But we're talking about free. We're going to use the free software available on Amazon. And again, look at your competition. What kind of covers do they have? Is it mostly text, or do they have a picture of themselves on the cover? Do they have a picture of the audience on the cover? Look at the cover. It's very critical, just like the title we talked about last week. Some people need a launch team, so you have 4 or 5 or 6 people helping you via software, via social media, so that they can help get the word out. People are there to help proof your book. Again, use the assets that are available. You need to create an author account on Amazon. I'll show you exactly how to do that next week. And the same thing, publishing that book on Amazon. That's for next week. Next slide, please. Okay, I have 2 things I'm going to talk about. One I call the interview style. The other one I call the 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. Okay, if I asked you and I said, Dr. JACALYN, tell me about the first car you ever had, she could tell me without even thinking. We have some things in our minds that we know exactly. When somebody asks that question, we know the answer. So, my first car was this. If I put together the thoughts in questions, those questions become chapters to my book. With each question, I have a number of bullets that I want to have with that question so that I don't forget the order I want to talk about, or I don't forget something I want to talk about. But every so often, just as in your book, you need to have little stories. Those stories are what keeps people interest going. So if I have, my first car was this, and I talk about it a little bit. And I said, and I was driving over the High Bridge in Corpus Christi coming back home one night, and my left rear tire came off and passed me. I heard a big clunk, and boom, there's this tire rolling down the road in front of my car. I'm running. I finish rolling. After I stop, I crawl down the bridge with flashing lights on 3 wheels and a brake drum. I find my tire and I manage to get back up. The little stories add to whatever you're talking about. So you make sure that when you're doing your bullets of the things you want to talk about to answer that question, because the answer to that question is the value you're adding to your audience. That's what they need to know. That's what you've assessed in the beginning. But you're interviewing. You're being interviewed by somebody. It's you and someone else, and maybe you're recording it on your cell phone. Maybe you're recording it on your computer. It doesn't matter. You record it because that interview is very, very critical. You're answering a question that you know the answer to so well, you don't even have to think about it. You look at a couple of bullets and you can talk for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. That chapter flows out of you naturally. And as you're doing each one of these things, it becomes very easy to put together that chapter. And again, start with your passion and maybe chapter 5. But start with that one. And then you just have an interview. Another person has your list of questions. They have your bullets. They know exactly where you're going. You're looking to them eye to eye. You see exactly what's going on. This may be recorded on Zoom. Doesn't have to be somebody right there with you. But one-on-one, you see their reaction. You see their micro expressions in their face. You see their body language. They may be leaning in, listening to your story. They may be falling out. You'll know by their body language exactly where you have your audience because they are your audience at that time. So use that writing option. Record it. And let's jump to the next slide, please. And as you're writing that thing and recording the interview, there are several free transcription services. They'll take the audio file and give you a written file back. Dr. JACALYN used a couple different ones on her books that she's written. The first one, she's one. We went to a different one for the second book. But I listed several of them right there. O-Transcribed, Express Scribe, the FTW transcriber, InScribe transcribed. But I'll caution you right now, test out a couple of them. Just don't jump on one and leave it there. Have a paragraph, one paragraph, half a dozen sentences. You may have to download the software. You will have to download your software. But run through that as a test, read it, and see if the transcribed audio comes back to you the same way it was written. Sometimes they don't capitalize. Sometimes they don't put periods at the end of sentences. There's some software, artificial intelligence is really good when you do a microsecond stop between sentences. It knows, period. Dragon software is that way. It knows where to capitalize that next sentence and everything. Sometimes you may have to say next paragraph, but don't worry about saying next paragraph. You can come in there and you have that Word document. It comes back to you. Now you can put in the paragraphs where you need it. But that is the way you minimize the amount of editing, because you've given the audience an answer to a question, and that really requires no editing than if you're sitting there typing. And I just find it to be so much easier to write, especially for nonfiction. Last one, please. The editing manuscript, less proofing and publishing. So we're doing the exact same thing. We edit the manuscript, and I mentioned a second ago, there's less editing when you do an interview style and you record it. Again, proof it and publish, and we'll talk about the publishing next week. Next slide. No, we should have one more slide, Dr. JACALYN. There we go. This is the last slide. It's called the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10 method. I'm going to give that credit to a guy named Scott Moran. He's the one that introduced it to me. But your one is your central thing. What is the theme of your book? If I'm talking about health and wellness, then my book is health and wellness. What are 3 things that I want to talk about? These become the sections of my book. Maybe I want to talk about gut health, heart health, brain health. I have 3 sections. If I go on to gut health, that's one of the 3 parts of that. What are 5 things about gut health that I could talk about? And I go into diet. I can go into microbiome. I can go into various things. What are 5 things I could talk about brain health? What are 5 things I can talk about heart health? Then I go into each one of those ones. Let's say I'm talking about fasting for my gut health. What are 7 things about fasting that I should know about or should be doing or should be aware of? What's the good? What's the bad? What you're doing is you're taking each section and you're taking literally like an organizational chart and exploding it downward, where you take the consensus of everything at the top. Here's the next level of detail, the next level of detail. Here's the micro levels of detail. But what it does is it keeps each section very well organized, because in that section going down, there's that part covered, there's this part covered, there's this part covered, and you're taking a very, very complex topic and you're allowing yourself to go into intimate level of detail, because it's within that hierarchy going down each time. Then you back up and you go back down again. You back up and you go back down again. So if you have a topic that's really complex, there's a lot of them out there. This might be a very, very good method for you. And the same thing works on speaking. You could have 3 topics that you want to cover today, and then you have 5 points about, or 3 to 5 points you want to talk about topic number 1, topic number 2, topic number 3. So whether you're speaking or writing, this process of exploding downward, but keeping everything within the context of what is the topic right above it? What is that subtopic right above it? What is that detail right above it? So those are the things that you can do. This doesn't lend itself so well to interviewing, but it lends itself exceptionally well to giving that organization for how you want to write that book. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything up and saying there's a lot of different options you can have to write, but you got to start. And so at some point in time, you start, you'll have a piece of paper in front of you with words on it. Those words will get organized. You'll end up having something that you can show to people. It'll be edited. You proof it. I'm happy with it. Now I'm ready to publish, and we're going to talk about that next week. Dr. JACALYN.
Very well done, as always, Red. Thank you.
You're so kind.
No, every time I learn something new, and I've been working with you how long? You keep a lot of goodies, some nuggets you keep.
Yeah. It has been a while, hasn't it? So going a little while. Hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It has been a long time.
It has been a long time. So you shared a number of things for people who are first-time authors, and also for people who are interested in publishing for free, and really where everything is totally free. And you and I have talked about this before, but I'm going to take this opportunity at the end of your show here just to put up the book covers for the new book, Adversity to Awesome. And I really am perplexed as to which one to go with, Red, because now it's almost even. So if you can just share maybe your thoughts with our audience about selecting a book cover. Here are the 2 that we have. And how does one know which one to go with? We've got this one, which is yellow. And then we've got this one, which has more vibrant colors in it. So the
Well,
feedback I've been getting is that this one, people like it because it's more powerful. And then on the other side, people feel fear and they also think of blood. So, and this one, what I've gotten is that if it was in a bookstore, which it's not, it would be easy to spot from a distance and would draw someone in.
well, we talked about this several times. You have a website that has some primary colors that goes with the theme of stuff you're talking about. So your primary colors, may be blue and green because you're in health and wellness. It may be other things. So you might want to try to look at what are the colors of your competitors. If you're talking about stories of inspiration, stories of adversity, what do other people have on their covers that give some level of success from the doldrums or success from real adversity? So that's a good way to check your colors. Same way checking your fonts. What kind of fonts do they use? Now, the fonts for book covers are totally different than the fonts you use inside the book, because when you shrink that book down to the size of a postage stamp and you still want to be able to read the text on there, Times New Roman that you use for writing your paragraphs is not going to work on a book cover. So you have to have the right kind of fonts for your book cover. So having somebody design your book cover is not necessarily the best thing. May work, but again, they have to have access to the right kind of cover fonts. Again, the spacing where you want to have things. And again, take a look at your top 10 competitors. What are they using? Do most of them just have text? Do they have an illustration? Do they have a photograph? That gives you a lot of ammunition for knowing what are the best-selling books doing. You want your book to look like a bestseller. Why not emulate? Why not copy what they have? Now, in the case that we have here, we have one with the same cover. We just changed the colors, and that's what we're trying to capture. What do people want? Is it the yellow that really draws their attention, or is it a little bit more of the orange in there that highlights something? And that's the dilemma. You're almost at a point where flipping a coin is where you're at, but you want to have a little bit more ammunition than flipping a coin. So have we asked the right audience? Well, hopefully we asked readers, not authors, because authors have a different perspective on a cover than a reader has on a cover. So we really want readers to give us that feedback as opposed to other authors. So if you belong to an author group, which I strongly recommend you do if you are going to become an author, don't ask other authors about your book cover or your title. They have a different mindset. Ask readers what they want, because those are the people actually buying your book. Now, you may ask the authors how they do things in the process of their writing, the process of their organization. Lots of things you can ask them, but stay away from covers and titles, because the mindset, at least from what I've seen and people I've talked with, they are going to give you their interpretation from their perspective of writing what you should have, but they're not buying your book. You want the people who are buying your book to tell you what it is. I did 5 different covers for my book that was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. The book cover I loved, nobody liked. The book cover my number 5 choice, I'll throw it out there, was everybody loved it. It's crazy, because I want what people are going to buy, not what I want because this looks neat for me. So that's what we need to do, and that's what you're in the process of doing now, is getting that audience to tell you thumbs up on this one or thumbs down on that one. And that, two-way thing, that's pretty easy. So that's where we're at.
All right. Thanks for summing that up, Red. I appreciate it. And another great episode. What are you presenting next week? I know you said it already, but for people who are just tuning in.
The title is officially Publishing Concerns. So we're going to take that manuscript that you have, and we're going to create an author account, and we're going to show you how you actually go in there and make everything happen. And I may use one of my next book. I'm thinking about using my book on Alzheimer's to use that actually as an example, and go through there and just show real life, this is what we do, and talk our way through it as we're doing it. That's kind of what my mindset says right now, is let's just show a real world example about how you create everything, how it gets into the system, boom, 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 and boom, it'll happen.
I know that
it'll be
you
free.
showed me that. It's free. I learned a lot about that when you showed it to me. It's really a cool process to go through. So thank you.
And I will catch you next week on the Wise Ones and on Talking Heads.
And on the Talking Heads panel, don't forget.
We have that one on the 12th, don't we?
We have that on the 12th. Yes, that's next week, isn't it?
On USA Global TV.
Yes, yes, it is. So, and actually, Diane is available. So it should be really interesting because we have the whole panel and we have our special guest, David Shine, whom you've introduced us to. And I think it's going to be a great discussion. The topic will be decided by me 5 minutes before the show starts.
Which cover? The yellow? Okay.
No, that won't be the question. It'll be something else. But yeah, so thank you, Red, for being here. I appreciate it.
I look forward to our next journey together. Take care.
I do too. Thanks.
Bye
Bye.
now.
Well, folks, that closes out our shows for today. Let me tell you what's happening for tomorrow. We'd love to have you with us. Friday, April the 8th. These times are all Eastern Standard Time. So if you are in British summertime, please add 5 hours. If you're in Central European time, please add 6 hours. Okay, so Adversity Dawson, it's my book. Authentic Achievements is starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and our guest is Terry Tucker. At 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we have The Power of Etiquette and Manners, and our guest is Justina Mutali. We have an opening at 11 o'clock. I have a meeting, so we will not be broadcasting then. So at noon Eastern Time, we have Adversity to Awesome, and our guest is Sadie Marie. At 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the United Kitchens with celebrity chef and certified nutritionist Ricky McKenna. At 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the Listening Mentor with Caroline Heward. And at 3 p.m., we have Loving Longevity with Dr. Joseph Maroon, who is the neurologist for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And at 4 p.m., we have presenting Pet Psychic Amina, and our guest is Reverend Dottie Boone. If you've missed any of our shows this week, we've had some amazing guests, amazing talking head shows. Just go over to our YouTube channel. And if you're there now watching, please just click subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our USA Global TV family. And if you would like to join us for an interview, you can go over to our website, which is, surprise, usaglobaltv.com, and just go to book your session. All right. Thank you again for being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and just appreciate each and every view that we get. Thank you. Bye.